So in this video we are going to be continuing to take a look at a scenario where civilization starts over. We are now on episode 62 of the series, and in the last episode we saw a bunch of wars take place all throughout the world, we saw several expansions take place, and we also saw a pretty important civil war as well as some border disputes. But if you guys do end up enjoying this episode, please be sure to like and subscribe, and yeah, without further ado, let's get straight into it. So yeah, I don't want to go and get in the way of anything here. We're going to be starting off right where we left off, which is the big Mexican War. I'm going to be calling this the Mexican War. I think that's a decent name for it. But yeah, if you guys want a little bit of a recap, basically in the last episode, the Mexican country, which is what I'm going to be calling these guys, they invaded the Mayan country. Shout out to Batavia Old History for suggesting that name. Big thanks to him. But yeah, the Mexicans invaded the Mayan country, and they thought it would be a successful operation. However, we had California actually fund Arizonan rebels to break away in the north, and when the North American fascists found out that California was the one funding this rebellion, they declared war on California, and yeah, now this war has escalated to be a lot more than these guys originally thought it would be. So first things first, we are going to be beginning up here. So at this point, the entire North American fascist bloc is now fully involved in this war. Throughout the duration of this war, if I remember to, I'm going to be calling these guys the NAFB because it's a bit of a similar name. But we have NAFB forces arriving on the Arizonan border, and they are able to push California back, because at this point, the Californian forces / their military isn't fully involved in this conflict. However, we do have them managing to slow down the advances of the NAFB, so they only managed to do this amount of damage over here, and at this point the Californian forces are going to get fully involved. Looking at the navies of California, we have them fully pushing up towards the coast, and they manage to take full control over this region, and they start bombarding any of the coastal cities. It gets to the point where they lose full coastal control on this side of their water, and we have these guys meeting up with the Mayan navy down here as well, which isn't the strongest of navies, but it's still kind of there. On the other hand, however, we do have the NAFB moving their navy down and doing pretty well in this region, and they are able to fully capture the naval waters around this region over here. We also have Louisiana moving their navy down to this region north of the Yucatan Peninsula, and this leads to them being able to take over all of this water over here. So any of the naval battles that happen in the Gulf of Mexico happen very quickly and early on in the war, and yeah, this war is going to be mostly land focused, as the navies on each side overwhelm the rest of the navy on that specific side, if that makes any sense. But we actually have California making a move here. We have them managing to make several landings on the coast of Mexico, and this is a very big win for California. This really shows the strength of their navy. They are able to make 4 landings and capture 2 major cities in the process, and they make a 5th landing right next to this one, which is actually able to encircle it. And yeah, California is putting a very big portion of their forces into this. About 80% of their military is in these landings, and the rest is helping Arizona move on. And with these guys needing to reorganize their front lines in order to focus on this, we have Arizonan forces actually doing really well at pushing the Mexicans back. Down south, with increased support from the NAFB, we have Mexico managing to continue to push into the Mayan country. And on top of that, we see Louisiana go ahead and make a landing on the north of the Yucatan Peninsula, as well as over here capturing this major city and then moving in. The Yucatan country is completely encircled. I'm sure these guys are pissing their britches right now, but they'll be fine as they will get left alone. As we have the Louisianan country quickly moving in, this is really showing the strength of Louisiana. These guys are by far the strongest country in the NAFB. We do manage to see the Mayans make a little bit of a pushback. However, at this point, this front line is mostly stalemated as forces become evenly matched, as the Mexicans are really having to pull away from this front line to focus on the ginormous threat that is California. Like I did say in the last episode, California is the 2nd strongest country in all of the Americas. They are just a little bit stronger than Guyana, and they are a bit weaker than Ohio. So yeah, these guys are very strong and a very big threat to the NAFB, and in a short amount of time, they are able to capture almost the entire coast of this side of the Mexicans' land. The only remaining bit is this area down here. However, these forces on the coast are being bombarded by the Mayan and the Californian forces. At this point, we have a big naval operation take place, where we see the Californians in mass send troops over into the Mayans to help them hold off the Louisianans. The Louisianans are the biggest threat to California in this war, so we have them in mass shipping troops into the Mayan country, and this actually does have a decently large effect. We also have the Mexicans managing to add some more troops onto this front line over here, on the coastal front line rather, which allows the Mayans to recapture this major city. And yeah, at this point the war is going pretty decently for California. That is until we have a massive breakthrough take place in the Arizonan front lines. Like I said, a majority of the Californian forces were on this front line, and any forces that were fighting in Louisiana are now being shipped down to the Mayans, and a very smart Texan general sees the strategic position of this, to where they can kind of cut a wedge through this front line right over here, and attempt to cut these forces off, which would be a very big win for them. So we have Texas moving a lot of their forces away from the southern front line, which allows the Mayans to make a decently large pushback. And we have these Texan forces just slamming into the Arizonans, and their strategy is proven to be successful as they are able to see major gains. This does require a lot of conscription on the part of the Texan military, however it works exactly as planned, and we have these Arizonan and Californian forces be completely overwhelmed as they are pushed almost fully back to the Californian border. And these forces over here go ahead and merge up with California before being pushed back a little bit more. Now this is very bad for California, as now these forces over here are kind of fully separated. When they made the landings, they were of course still separated, but they never planned for them to be kind of disconnected from their mainland for that long, which is why the Arizonans eventually ended up connecting up with them. But now these guys are fully on their own, and this causes some very bad logistical situations, as in the most part these guys are now fully pushed back towards the coast, and any hope of advance is very unlikely for these guys, as we have the Californians rethinking their strategy and moving some forces back up over to this northern front line. At this point, the Arizonan forces basically just merge with California, and they are able to make a bit of a pushback. However, one thing this still does lead to is complete disorganization on the front lines with the Mayan country. This allows any gains that the Mexicans and the Mayans had against Louisiana to fully fall back, and we have the Louisianans managing to fully take control over the entire Yucatan Peninsula, and at this point, this situation is not looking so good for the Mayans anymore at all. And to make things even worse, we actually have another country going ahead and joining in on this war, and that country is going to be the Central American country. These guys fought up against the Mayans in World War III, and because they were also technically on the losing side, these guys were in the Triangle Alliance, these guys were in the Square Alliance, they both lost. They were not allowed to take any gains from the Mayans, and they are not very happy about this. And their people are in full support of joining this war in order to gain land that they believe rightfully should have been given to them in the World War III treaty. So, very unexpectedly and very badly for California and the Mayans, we have the Central American country rapidly moving in, and yet, no, okay, that's a nice landing, nope, oh yeah, bye-bye. So yeah, within just 3 weeks of the Central Americans joining in the war, that was basically the final straw for the Mayans, they fully go ahead and fall over. And yeah, just like that, not very good situation. Now, the only thing is, these guys still have a pretty big advantage over here, and that is because they have all of this naval waters under their control, which kind of stops any good advances being made by these guys. I mean, they can still make land advances, but in terms of being on the water, they are still stuck, and any coastal forces are being bombarded by the Californian Navy, which is a very big loss for them. So what we have happening is we have the NAFB going over to Egypt and asking if they can use the Panama Canal to move their military vessels through. Now, this was not allowed. In the Treaty of World War III, when this land was given over to Egypt, it was stated that no military vessels can be used to be moved through this strait, unless, of course, it was Egypt's, because, you got to have a bit of an unfair advantage there. However, these guys think they have a shot at being able to kind of gain Egypt's favour in this, because these guys worked with Egypt in the Third World War. They were also funded by Egypt, and after coming to a decision, the Egyptians are going to go ahead and let these guys move their military vessels through the Panama Canal. However, they do have to pay a sufficient fine for doing this, so Egypt's finding a way to benefit from this. Good on you, Egypt. But yeah, these guys are going to go ahead and pay some money to Egypt, and in turn of that, they're allowed to move their navies through the Panama Canal. And this is very bad for California, as while they do have a very strong navy, the entire combined navy of the NAFB, the strongest of that being the Louisianan and Texan Navy, the Louisianan Navy is actually extremely strong. We have these guys quickly managing to make a push up, combating these guys in the former Mayan naval waters. They are able to quickly push up, and this greatly hurts any advances that the Californians were hoping to make on the southern coastal region. And eventually, we have these guys meeting up with the forces on the coast here, where a very brutal naval battle happens, and this will surely determine the course of the war. And in this naval battle, we have the NAFB forces coming out on top, and they are able to suffer a massive defeat against the Californians. And yeah, the Californians, they suffer a huge defeat from this, like I did just say. And yeah, the California Navy is kind of cooked here. This is the second time that California has kind of been blasted around in a war, and they're starting to get very tired of that. Now, this cuts off a lot of supply lines that were being supplied by the coast, which causes a lot of these forces over here to get heavily pushed back, and eventually, after a few months of brutal fighting, we have all of these forces, all of these Californian forces, on the Mexican coast being fully kicked out. And after this, the Californians are now fully focused on defending this front line up here. Unfortunately though, with the entire army of the NAFB now tumbling down on them, as well as them having a lot less coastal control, they lost a lot of troops in this, they weren't able to evacuate about 2/3 of them, so they are really down at the moment. They start to get very heavily pushed back. And eventually, after we have the NAFB moving their navy up around the Baja Peninsula / Baja California, we have Louisiana managing to make a landing on it, and these guys quickly manage to push up. And at this point, seeing the fate of the war and not wanting a lot of their Californian coastal major cities to get bombarded by the navy of the NAFB, which is still moving up north, the Californians are reluctantly going to go ahead and surrender over to the NAFB and kind of the Central American country. And yeah, just like that, we can go ahead and take a look at the peace treaty of this pretty important regional war here. So this is what we go ahead and see for the peace treaty here, and there is actually quite a bit to break down. So the biggest thing, the Mexicans are actually going to be taking big advantage of all the countries that they have managed to defeat here. They take this very large portion of land from the Mayans. This is extremely good for them, this gives them 3 major cities, which they kind of desperately need. And they also gain all of Baja California, as well as these 2 islands here, which is a very big win for them. And California has lost a decent bit here, although they have managed to keep all of their valuable regions. There was only 2 major cities here, so not too big of a loss for them, although they did take a big morale loss, and also their navy was kind of destroyed here. Next up, moving back over to the Mayans, we have the Central Americans gaining this big chunk of land right here. This was their aspirations in World War III, and of course they didn't get that, but they get it now, so I guess it worked out for them in the end. And finally, we have Louisiana setting up a small colony on the northern tip of the Yucatan Peninsula, just like so. And yeah, so not very good for the Mayans here. They are kind of heavily hurt. And all of a sudden, Mexico, who just a few episodes ago was not that big of a country actually, is starting to become a pretty strong regional power, and also a pretty large country as well. If we think about it, they used to look a bit like this before World War III. So yeah, they're really growing a lot, although maybe they should watch it, because I don't think they want to become unstable. Next up, moving over to Africa, we're going to be taking a look at something a little bit more wholesome. This country over here was recently invaded by the Blue Team, and they were converted to a democratic government, and this government is now finally deciding to go ahead and join in on the Western African Economical Alliance, just like so. So yeah, that is a pretty big helping hand to them, and their economy starts to see some pretty big improvements early on, as soon as they join this alliance. But next up, we need to move over to the Southern African country, because some pretty interesting stuff is taking place down here. Now, throughout the course of history, the Southern African country has always been pretty peaceful and pretty neutral. They formed here before the Scramble for Africa. They are one of the countries that managed to survive it. And yeah, they've been pretty peaceful. However, there is some stuff happening in the South African country that is pretty concerning. As we can see, these guys are a monarchy. However, this is starting to cause some issues. And that is because of one particular figure in the Southern African country. So, I'm not too sure, what they farm down here in real life, but in this weird, wacky Wixo timeline, there is a ginormous potato farming industry in South Africa, And there is one person who is basically like the head of a ginormous potato farming tycoon. His name is Simon, and he is an extremely powerful figure in the Southern African country, and very similar to what we saw in real life in the Central American countries, kind of the banana wars. These guys, their potatoes is very important to them. And Simon has actually managed to get his own private military group, which he has paid for with his potato driven fortune. And he's going to do the very casual thing of overthrowing the South African government. Also, why is Galicia still here? That should not be there. But all across the country, we have military groups popping up in favour of Simon. They call themselves the Spudders, and these guys are extremely powerful. They are a very aggressive military group, in fact. And within a couple of weeks, they are able to fully take control over the South African country. They abolish the South African monarchy and place Simon in power as a dictator. And let's just say this guy has some plans for the future of his country, but we'll have to see where this leads to in the next couple of episodes. Next up, moving back over to Kazakhstan, we're going to be taking a look at our daily Kazakhstan update. Yes, that's right, this is actually an official thing now. The daily Kazakhstan update is real. And where we're going to be seeing this little thing over here is going to be between the fascist country and the dictatorship country. These two were the only ones released without kind of some sort of supervision from the CN. I guess these two weren't as well. But the two main pink team countries, the dark red one and the pink one, these guys were kind of influenced by the CN, they're now part of the CN. However, these four in the south were kind of left alone, and these two are going to take advantage of that to start blasting each other. As we have the red country going ahead and launching an invasion into the fascist country, quickly capturing the capital, and these guys were not expecting this. These guys are also extremely weak and disorganized. Like I said, this guy, their government was formed from the previous fascist government of the pink team, as well as the kind of split off bit of the fascist council. So yeah, these guys, very unstable. And these guys are going to take advantage of this as they take over about half of the country. And shortly after this, they force a peace treaty on the country where they gain a very large chunk of this land over here. These guys will be moving their capital to a small town, and they make sure to move it very far away from the red team. So yeah, these guys, not the greatest situation for them. They are now extremely weak. But next up, we need to move over to Europe because some stuff has been brewing over here for a while. So ever since it was revealed in World War III that the Dutch have their own nuclear bombs, as we can see here, it's also kind of been revealed that the Dutch have a little bit of a plan to kind of regain some of their former strength. The Dutch have been militarizing up throughout the past few episodes, and the Dutch are now going to be doing something that is quite surprising that very few people were actually expecting. However, if you really think about it, this war probably would have happened before. But that is, the red team is going to be invading the blue team. As we see the Dutch forces cross into the French Republic, these guys, they're looking for revenge. They know what the French did in World War II. They were communists, they occupied the whole country, and they did some very bad massacres of their population, and they are looking to take some revenge. As we see Dutch forces in mass cross into the French, and not only were the French not expecting this at all, the French are just completely overwhelmed. As we see within 2 months of this invasion, the Dutch are able to capture the French capital, and we also see a not pro-Dutch, but a rebellion supported by the Dutch happen over here in Brittany, as we see this Brittany country break away. Now, the French are decently stubborn, they don't go ahead and surrender because of this, so we have to see the Dutch manage to make a push down. And unfortunately for the French, there's going to be another country actually getting involved, and that is going to be this Geneva country over here, or Switzerland or whatever. We have the Swiss go ahead and move in. I'm pretty sure, like every single war that the French have ever been involved in, these guys have in some way. These guys are the number one ops of the French, and they are looking to regain some land that they once had from the French. And eventually, after just getting completely decimated by the Dutch, the French will eventually go ahead and decide to surrender, and we can go ahead and take a look at this peace treaty. So taking a look at this peace treaty here, we can see that the French kind of get blasted here. They lose a lot of very valuable land, and they are embarrassed and weakened because of this, so yeah, rip. First things first, we see the Brittany country go ahead and form. They only have one city, so that is exactly where their capital will go ahead and be located. We have Geneva. They actually don't take that much land, they only take a small bit, and that is because the Dutch kind of limited that. They didn't really want these guys to get ginormous. They definitely don't have ambitions of invading this country or anything. But yeah, that is what we see them gain. They don't gain all that much, and they're a little bit disappointed with that. But hey, at least they gain a little bit of land. And finally, we have the Dutch gain all of this land. This is a very big win. They gain a lot of land around the River Seine, and they also gain 3 major cities. So yeah, very big win for them. And also, they are now right on the doorstep of the French capital. In fact, the outskirts of the city, which is shown by this province, is literally on the border of the Dutch. So yeah, very big win for them. And in fact, speaking of that, just a few months after this war takes place, the French go ahead and move their capital. Probably the smart decision. I would have probably done the same. They go ahead and move it to this city. I have mentioned the city in the past. This is an important port city for them. This was like important for their colony. I believe the last time I even mentioned the city though was like episode. I believe it was when the USB was breaking away actually. But yeah, these guys moved their capital to this city over here, which pretty big move for them. This has been their capital ever since episode 1. So yeah, but next up we're actually going to be staying with Europe, because we actually see something happen in Europe that has kind of been in the making for a while, in fact even before World War III, and that is actually an economical alliance. As we see the formation of the European Commonwealth, and that is right, Europe is economically unionizing, which is a pretty big step for them. This continent has been fairly peaceful in the more recent times. These guys were not that much involved in World War III. But yeah, we have these guys going ahead and forming up a European Economical Alliance, and let's go ahead and see which countries decide to join. So the countries that go ahead and found this alliance, these are the original starting members, are going to be the members of the IDP and Ireland. So these guys are the first to announce the creation of this alliance. However, immediately after it is formed, there are several other countries that did plan on joining, that join basically straight away, but these are the kind of founding members of this pact. And the countries that go ahead and join in are the English country, the Scottish country, Denmark, Gibraltar, and finally Naples. So these are the founding members, or the first members to join in on the European Commonwealth. So yeah, this is immediately a pretty big and quite a strong economical alliance. It is not currency based. However, there is a currency that is implemented into this that you can choose to replace with your currency, and we see that mostly with the countries outside of the Iberian Peninsula. The IDP already has their own currency, the Iberian pound sterling. That's like their whole alliance currency. But we have the British Isles countries, as well as Denmark, adopting this new currency. Now, the Dutch are considering joining in. However, at the moment, because of their recent act of aggression, they are barred from joining. But we'll have to see if they do end up joining in later on. Next up, we will actually be sticking with alliances as we move over to our military alliances layer, and we're actually going to be seeing a new one form up. As we see the formation of the Parallelogram Alliance, and this is an alliance over here in Indonesia/Oceania, and the countries that go ahead and join this alliance, or the countries that found this alliance rather, are going to be the Red Australian country and Indonesia, the third strongest country in the world. This alliance is basically what most countries see as the continuation to the Gear Alliance. These guys were both in the Gear Alliance together, and they are pretty close allies. So yeah, they just wanted to defend themselves, as the Red Australians do feel a little bit threatened by the other Australian countries banding up against them. These guys are kind of working together in the more modern time, and they are looking extremely hostile towards the Red Australians, so they just want to be protected. Nothing wrong with that, I suppose. Now, the next thing I want to talk about isn't so much kind of map-based, it's more so lore-based, and that is the creation of the internet. It is the year 2005 now, and the internet has just been created, so that's a pretty big step for these people, and we'll have to see if this leads to anything in the future, but the internet, stuff like that exists now, a bit later on than in real life. But, you know, still pretty important to have it happen. Next up, we will be moving down over to Africa, as we're going to be seeing something happen in regards to this over here, this little dispute. Now, in the last episode, these three countries went ahead and divided up the red country that was formerly here, and it was more so these two countries joining in to stop Nigeria from gaining the whole thing. The country, I believe, the rest of the land it had was like this, and they only got this land down here, which they aren't very happy about, and in that peace treaty, they had this land kind of occupied. However, in the peace treaty, it was given over to these guys, and Nigeria was not happy about this at all, so they went ahead and claimed it. And it's at this point where these guys are now going to be involving military action, as we see these guys go ahead and move their forces in to occupy this region, and they are successfully able to do so. And I'm not going to lie, the Grey Team, they are not going to be able to do much here, so very reluctantly they are going to be giving this land over to Nigeria, very unwillingly of course, but they can't really do much. The Green Team does offer to help if any major conflict starts, however the Grey Team denies that, saying there's not really any much point, this land wasn't very valuable, so let's just go ahead and give it to them. Let's appease Nigeria here. So as we can see here, we can see that this province is going to be given fully over to Nigeria, of course, just like so. And yeah, Nigeria is getting pretty chunky now. Next up, we need to move over to Europe, and more specifically, we need to talk about the stability layer, because some stuff is continuing to take place here. And that is that the Venetian Union is continuing to lose stability. They now move over to an orange stability, and these guys are starting to rapidly become way more unstable. The religious divide and the kind of radicalism divide between the Union, or not really radicalism, but the ideological more so divide between the two members of the Union is starting to become way more severe, and a lot more internal issues are starting to break out now, and it's really just going downhill for the Venetians. But the final event that we will be seeing in this video, because I don't want this video to be too ridiculously long, there has been a lot of stuff happening in it, and we're going to be moving over to the Indian country over here, because in the last episode we saw the Gujrats make a very large claim over the Purple Indian country, and they are now going to be finally acting upon this, as we have the Gujarat forces move in and begin to invade into this country. And this conflict, not to spoil anything, but this is going to be a very bloody and long-lasting conflict. They are able to capture the capital of the Purple Team, but that is going to be all we're looking at today in regards to this war. We will be focusing a little bit more on that in the next coming episodes. But yeah, that is going to be it for this video. I really hope you guys did enjoy. I was actually having a lot of fun recording this one. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next episode.